Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning to this training that we have, Navigator training. My name is Antonio Corchado. I am the Office for New Americans Immigrant Navigator at the center. We this morning have Shana Dahlin. She is from Legal Services of Central New York. She is a community outreach specialist. She's going to be joining us this morning. We're so excited to have her. And she's going to have some great information in regards to lead. And I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself and start the presentation. Welcome, Shana.
Thank you, Antonio. As mentioned, I work for Legal Services of Central New York. We're located in Utica at 120 Bleecker Street, right across the street from the center. And we provide free civil legal services to the community. We do a whole bunch of different things, but we focus a lot on housing locally, education, benefits, and unemployment. And I do community outreach, specifically around ending childhood lead poisoning in the Utica, Oneida County area. So today I have kind of an introductory presentation on what is lead, and I'll talk about the dangers of it. So let me pull it up. Okay, so what you need to know about lead. It's a heavy metal that gets stored in the body, and it causes lifelong problems that I will talk more about in this presentation. But if we go ahead, when I talk to people about this issue, I often hear the same remarks. People say, "Oh, I didn't know lead was still a problem." People think it's a problem in the past, that we've fixed it, but sadly, that's not the case. So I have a question. What is a safe amount of lead in your blood? Well, sadly, the answer is 0. No amount of lead is safe in the body, right? And last year, actually last September, Dr. Howard Zucker, who is the New York State Commissioner of Health, recently lowered the consideration for childhood lead poisoning from 10 micrograms per deciliter, right? So that's the amount of lead in the blood, to 5 micrograms, right? So by lowering it, that actually will increase the number of cases of childhood lead poisoning. And just to give you some more context, looking at the most recent data from 2017, the national average of children with a BLL, which is a blood lead level, right? That's what we call it, of greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter was only 3%. And if we look at our state, excluding New York City, the average BLL was 2.8%. So a little bit lower than the national average. But if you look at Oneida County, right, we're almost 4 times the amount, right, at 11.7% of the children being poisoned. Or if you put it in individual numbers, right, 519 children under the age of 6 years old have been poisoned, and most of those cases happening right here in Utica. So you might ask, why? Why is it happening here? Why is it such a problem? Well, if you look at this chart that the EPA put out, Older homes that were built before 1978 are more likely to have lead paint, right? Back in 1978 is when the government officially started to ban lead in products. So if you look at the graph, right, about 24% of homes were built between 1960 to 1977. About 69% of homes were built between 1940 and 1959. And then the majority, right, of homes that have lead were built before 1940 at 87%. And just a little more information about housing in Utica, right? There are concentrated poverty in certain neighborhoods because of years of racial housing policies called redlining. And actually, there's a great book called The Color of Law, written by Richard Rothstein that talks more about it. When people weren't able to get housing loans and were forced to live in certain neighborhoods based on race and ethnicity. Utica also has 52% renters, right? So that's pretty high. And, you know, as a renter, you are relying on your landlord to keep the property maintained and safe. And if there's lead, to either remove it or at least keep it safe by painting over it. And if you look here at the chart, we have a lot of old homes in Utica, right? It's almost the same kind of trend that the last graph showed. So again, looking at the numbers, most of the homes in Utica were built around the 30s or before. A big boom kind of in the 40s to the 60s happened too, especially in North and South Utica. And now if you look at this map, this is the city of Utica based on census tracts. And this was done a few years ago through the CLIP program, or the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program that Cornell Cooperative Extension was in charge of. And if you look at the dots, right, this doesn't necessarily mean the number of lead poisoning cases, but the red dots are where multiple inspections happened, right? Especially if, again, they were rental apartments or homes and people moved in and out of them frequently. And then the yellow dots are single inspection properties. So again, looking at the different neighborhoods, you see a lot of the dots kind of clustered in central Utica, kind of in Cornhill area, and in East Utica and West Utica. And again, not so much in South or North Utica because of more wealthier neighborhoods and newer built homes. So 70% of all childhood lead poisoning happens because of lead paint dust. Just a tiny bit of dust on your finger is enough to poison a child for life. And it's often created by opening and closing windows with old lead paint. And if you look at the pictures, you know, since it's summertime and it's hot, and if you don't have an air conditioner, oftentimes you'll see people putting these box fans in the window to cool down. But if there's lead dust in there, it just spreads it all over. Windowsills are also at the perfect height for toddlers and small children who are learning to walk. They'll often pull themselves up by grabbing the ledge, or perhaps even at mouth level will bite on the wood if they are teething. And actually, not too many people know that lead has a naturally sweet taste. So, you know, people have usually heard about the problem of eating lead paint chips, and kids have in the past because of certain disorders called pica, but also because it tastes sweet like candy. So the next slide here shows some examples of chipping and peeling paint. Again, it can be inside the home or outside the home. Again, usually near windows or doors. And even if you look at the picture of the door, right? If you're, say, moving into a home or moving the furniture around and you accidentally bang the wall and put a hole in, if there's lead paint underneath that's been covered up and it gets exposed by a hole or damage, again, that can release the lead dust. So that should be fixed immediately. But there's other sources of lead. Here is a slide of lead in the environment, especially in soil near homes with lead paint, roads, especially before 1978, there was lead in gasoline, right? So there's a lot of pollution that happened by highways and even roads that had stop signs on them, right? So when the car stopped at the sign and idled, even that extra time released more lead into the ground. And you can also find it in industrial sites. The picture here with the tower is of an old lead smelter where they would, melt down lead to make a number of different things like bullets or pipes, which leads me to the other source of lead poisoning in the environment is lead in water from service lines that go underground from your house to the street, essentially. And a lot of those were, built many years ago. And when the local water authorities treat water, they put a chemical in called anti-corrosive. That way, lead doesn't leach into the water system. But if you're familiar with the story of Flint, Michigan, they had a couple of problems. They switched their water source, and they had lots of lead service lines. So by switching the water source, it was very acidic, which caused more corrosion, and thus, many people were affected in Michigan. And I have another book I recommend, which is What the Eyes Don't See by Mona Hanna-Attisha. She's a pediatrician from Flint that kind of broke the news story of the lead poisoning in Flint. And finally, you can find lead in a number of consumer products, especially in spices, candies that are imported from overseas that maybe don't have as strict lead guidelines as the US does. Same goes with toys, jewelry, pottery. They put lead in the glaze sometimes, so it gives it a brighter color, and also can be found in some cosmetics, such as kohl eyeliner or some lipsticks. So why is lead so dangerous? Well, it's because it's a neurotoxin, right? So it affects mostly the brain, as well as many other organs. But if you look at the picture here in red, where it's circled, that is the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for memory, focus, emotional control. And when a child or even adult is lead poisoned, it damages this part, which can cause aggression and violence, poor impulse control, lack of focus, and hyperactivity. And actually, in young children, lead starts to replace calcium in the body because it's easier to absorb. And over time, that lead gets stored in their teeth and bones. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Children don't develop a blood-brain barrier until they're about 6 years old. So that's why young children are so vulnerable to lead poisoning. And that's why that's our main target for this campaign. Once you're older than 6, your brain is able to kind of filter out the lead and protect it that way. But sadly, you know, children, especially toddlers, they get the most damage from living in a home with lead. So I made this chart, right? It kind of looks at the ripple effect of lead poisoning, not just on the individual child, but on the rest of their life and greater society. So starting kind of in the middle, you have the child's health, right? Lead poisoning can reduce IQ points. Again, talking about damaging the prefrontal cortex. It can cause learning disabilities, right? Difficult reading, and other things like speech and hearing disorders, and behavioral issues, which can lead to problems in their future. For example, if they have a learning disability, right, they might have academic failure if they can't keep up with the schoolwork. Behavioral issues could lead to perhaps a criminal record or even incarceration, and difficulty with employment, keeping a job. And then other health effects are heart disease and stroke, right? Again, it's in the blood and it affects, you know, all of the organs as well. And specifically for women, right? Women who were poisoned as children or even as adults, they can pass that lead to their unborn baby. Again, because that lead gets stored in their bones, it can leach out into their blood again if they're pregnant. And actually, again, as they get older, and if they have osteoporosis, you know, as the bones start to break down, it could go back into their blood and poison them, possibly for a third time. And then looking at the biggest ring here, we talk about society's effect with lead poisoning: increased costs to healthcare, joblessness, more need for special education services, and public safety. So I know that sounds very dark and gloomy, but there is hope. Because lead poisoning, unlike other things, is 100% preventable. So if you test your home using the little sticks that you see in the corner, the instant lead test, you can buy those at Lowe's, Home Depot, any home store, and you can test surfaces in your home for lead, and it will turn red if there is lead present. And if it's a big problem, you can talk to the health department, and they have what's called an XRF gun, which is essentially an X-ray. And you can see in the picture below, they point it at surfaces and can measure the amount of lead present. You should test your kids, right? This is very important. New York State requires all 1 and 2-year-olds to be tested, but if they show signs of an elevated blood level, you should be retested up until about 6 years old to check if the levels have gone down any or increased. And again, you should test yourself, especially if you're a pregnant woman or if you work in an industry that you might be exposed to lead. For example, if you work with maybe lead batteries, or if you're working construction and home repair, there's a number of other ways to be exposed. And another great way to minimize lead poisoning is to keep yourself and home clean. So again, especially in times of COVID, it's important to wash your hands for many reasons, but especially before meals, bedtime, and after using the bathroom. Again, the lead dust is very, very small and sticks to, any surface. So you should really, really wash thoroughly to get it off. Also, wash pacifiers, bottles, spoons whenever they fall on the floor. Again, this is just good practice in general, but again, lead dust settles on floors oftentimes. And again, wash any toys a child puts in their mouth at least once a day. Damp, mop floors and wipe window wells twice a week. This is called wet cleaning because, again, the water traps the lead and then you can dispose of it that way. And very important, use cold water for making formula and cooking. Sometimes people think by using hot water for cooking or formula, it boils faster or whatever, but actually running hot water through the pipes in your home can cause lead to leach out easier. Also, you can help fight lead absorption in the body by having a well-rounded diet. So looking at this chart here that the Department of Health put out, right? Eating foods with calcium, again, helps it block out the lead. So again, dairy products, but also sweet potatoes and dried fruits are a good source of calcium. Iron protects, again, for the blood. So eating proteins, eggs, peanut butter, meats, and whole grain breads and cereals. Vitamin C also helps the body absorb both of those nutrients. So again, fresh fruits and veggies are great. Also, you should feed children regular meals throughout the day and snacks to keep their stomachs full because empty stomachs can absorb more lead. And finally, right, get involved. I'm working on organizing a grassroots group called Take the Lead or Take the Lead, depending how you read it. And we're looking for anyone really to get involved, but especially parents with children, and especially if they're lead poisoned children, teachers, right? They see the effects of lead poisoning in the classroom every day. Same goes with childcare providers, healthcare workers, property owners who want to, right, be the leading example of how to maintain property safely, and community leaders who are interested in the topic. You can find us on Facebook, Take the Lead in Utica, or send us an email at takethelead.utica@gmail.com. And lastly, if you have any questions, you can send me an email or give me a call. Again, we're located in downtown Utica at 120 Bleecker Street. We're actually on the second floor. I should have put this in there. We share the building with our sister organization, Legal Aid. But again, if you have any issues that you're looking at, please feel free to contact us.
Excellent. Thank you, Shana.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you for such a great presentation. The presentation will actually be uploaded on the Facebook page for the center, and that's going to be Facebook. If you search us, it'll be at the Center Utica. Once we have it uploaded on there, if there's questions, because I don't see any on the chat right now, if there's questions that come up, you can comment right on there. I'll make sure that Shana gets to them and can answer those questions. We will definitely tag her on there. If you have any other needs in regards to services, she has obviously the information up. Make sure you give her a call or send her a message via email. Us at the center, obviously visit our Facebook page. It's going to be, like I said, at the Center Utica. And we have lots of services that we provide, lots of great trainings that we actually post. And this is going to be one of them. So I want to thank you for being here with us today, Shana. Thank you so much. Once again, great presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. A lot of information that I did not know. So, and I know you hear that a lot. So,
I mean, yeah, it's a lot to take in, and it's kind of depressing, but it's really important to get out there.
Really important information. I completely agree. So again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.